Okay, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you join us. We will be talking about the introduction to exercise, health, and wellness. So, before we get started, we're going to start talking about our learning objectives. So, upon the completion of this lecture, you will be able to recognize the importance of exercise, health, and wellness, and then identify the four pillars which promote exercise, health, and wellness. So, before we get started, we're going to go through a couple of definitions of what is health, what is wellness, and what is exercise. So, health is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well being, and wellness is the active process through which people become aware and make choices to support their overall health. Exercise is planned, structured, and repetitive physical activity designed to improve or maintain physical fitness and overall health. So, why does health, exercise, and wellness matter? So, it's very important to realize that there is a big problem with obesity in the United States, and about 40% of our population is obese. So I included this little map right here to show us what obesity rates look like in the United States. So down here we see this bright red, maroon, orangish colors. Those are all the prevalence of obesity in each of the states. So whenever we look at Texas specifically, about 35 to 40% of our population alone is considered obese or overweight. So that's really important to consider whenever we are talking about exercise, health, and wellness. Along with that, about 25% of the US population is physically inactive. So, kind of the same chart here. We have our code down here. So, this maroon is about 30% of the population being physically inactive. So, that means no movement, doesn't get up to go on a walk, isn't meeting those daily requirements each week of moving their body. And for our state, Texas, we're about 25 to 30% of the population in Texas alone is physically inactive. So that is a big problem, and those two are usually linked together, obesity and physical inactivity. So it's important that we have exercise, health, and wellness so that we can combat those two things. So, how are they linked together? They're linked together because sedentary lifestyles that usually goes hand in hand with obesity and physical inactivity. We also see when people are physically inactive, they're also more likely to gain weight, which can cause obesity or overweight. We also have an increased chance of developing a cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and cancer. So, people who are obese or overweight are more prone to develop those diseases. And a lot of things that we like to focus on in kinesiology world is how can we combat diseases like cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and cancer through the use of exercise or just making sure that we take care of our body. So, we're going to cover the four pillars of exercise, health, and wellness. And I really love a acronym or analogy or anything that'll help me remember something. So we are going to talk about move, fuel, rest, and stress less. So those are the four pillars that we will cover today, and we will start off with movement. So movement is important. So ACSM recommends that we do at least 30 minutes of moderate intensity physical activity for 5 days a week. So 30 minutes is kind of the low end. Some places you might see 150 to 300 minutes, but that 30 minutes is the low end of physical activity that we want to do each week. So, physical activity can include something like going on a walk. So, just taking a 30-minute walk each day, that is really good for your health. Lifting weights. So, whenever we lift weights, we are getting stronger, and that can help us do a lot of daily activities later on in life. Another activity that we could do each week is run. And then we also want to count those little small activities in between. So making sure that if we're going to go to the store or we're going to our apartment, that maybe we park a little bit further out and take those extra steps. Or maybe when we're getting home, instead of taking the elevator, or we're going to class, instead of taking the elevator, we just take the stairs or get those extra steps in so that we're moving our body and making sure that we are healthy. So I always like to say any movement is better than no movement. So even those little tasks that require movement is better than just being sedentary. So the second pillar we're going to cover is fuel. So we talked about this in our previous lecture. We're going to briefly discuss it today. Fueling our bodies is just like putting gas in a car. We need food to fuel our bodies, and we want to make sure that we have a very colorful plate. So making sure our meal is balanced and well-rounded, that we have a lot of vegetables within our meals, whole grains, healthy proteins, and fruits while we're cooking with healthy oils and making sure that we're ingesting water and a lot of it throughout the day. So that is really important, and also making sure that we limit the amount of processed foods that we consume. That's also a pretty important part of combating obesity and other things that may be linked to diseases like cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and cancer. The third pillar we're going to cover today is rest. So, this one I'm going to spend a little bit of time on because I think it's really important, especially as college-aged individuals and having busy lives. Sometimes we don't think too much about sleeping and getting rest. So, we want to make sure that we're getting those 7 to 9 hours a day of sleep and that we are having a consistent sleep schedule. So, making sure that whenever we're sleeping, we're going to bed at the same time, doing the same things right before bed to make sure that we have consistency in how we sleep because it affects some of our days the next day if those things aren't achieved. So, limiting our screen time before bed is kind of vital to making sure that we can have adequate sleep throughout the night. And just knowing that most of the time, whenever we are sleeping, this is a huge part of how we recover our bodies physically, mentally, emotionally. All of that can be recovered following sleep. So, we're going to touch on this in the next slide, but sleep quality is better than sleep quantity. So, whenever we talk about the sleep cycles, we have four different stages of the sleep cycle. One is stage one is entering sleep. Stage two is getting into that deeper sleep. So, that's usually considered light sleep. Stage three and four, that's where we have deep sleep and then REM sleep. So, whenever we sleep, we want to make sure that we're constantly going through each of these cycles. So, whenever we will go through stage one as soon as we're winding down. So, making sure if we're going to wind down for the night, we put our phones away, we're not close to them. Maybe we read a book before bed, or we journal, or we do something like that to just kind of relax our mind and put it in a good state to go to sleep. Stage two, we do a lot of restoration in the brain in that stage. And then stage three and four, that's where most of our recovery kind of gets completed at because we're getting into that deep relaxation and we're also getting the most restorative sleep in that process. So, the key to sleep is making sure that we're constantly rotating through those stages. So, this is important because when we rotate through those stages, we're maximizing our academic performance, we're maintaining physical and mental health, and then it helps our body recover properly. So, I'm going to show you a little bit of my sleep data that I have collected. So, we have right here 8 hours of sleep. We're in that pretty adequate range of sleep. So you can see that awake, the REM, the light, and the deep. And I'm constantly going in and out of that sleep. So that's really good. That is where most of my recovery is um, getting done at. And this is good for overall. a nice day and waking up and being able to do our daily tasks to our greatest ability. On the other hand, we have this day of sleep where we only had about 5, 6 hours of sleep and we weren't going in and out of those stages a lot. So this day, my body was not feeling too great and I didn't recover as well just because I wasn't going in and out of those different stages of sleep. The last pillar that we will discuss is stress less. So making sure that all the craziness going through our day, we make sure to take a step back. We do some deep breathing activities, go out in nature, sit down, maybe go on a little walk in the day, but also making sure that we're making social connections. So while we can take time out in nature, it's also really important that we're still connecting with our friends, hanging out with them, and just taking a step away from any priorities that we might have in the day. And then mindfulness and rest. So that goes back to sleep. Whenever we are sleeping, we are kind of letting our bodies relax in that sense. So stress less and sleep kind of go hand in hand with each other. There are a few applications that are available to kind of focus on the mindfulness. And one that I included in today's lecture is this app, Headspace. It tailors mindfulness activities to complete, especially when you've had stressful days. So, in conclusion, from today's lecture, we talked about rising obesity and physical inactivity and how they're public health concerns in the United States and how our bodies are designed to respond and to treat how we respond to them. We also discussed the 4 pillars of exercise, health, and wellness and how they're essential to shaping our lives and long lasting health benefits over time. So, developing these healthy habits right now can be forever habits that we latch onto and integrate throughout our lives to make sure that we stay healthy, we have good wellness, and overall, we just feel good about our daily lives. So, at the end of today's lecture, I'd like you all to submit or email me a 2 paragraph reflection about the 4 pillars of exercise, health, and wellness. And I'd like you to answer these 2 questions within that reflection. So I want you all to reflect and think on how do you currently incorporate these 4 pillars in your daily lives? So are you getting those 8 hours of sleep a night? Are you moving your body, getting that recommended 5 days, 30 minutes a day? What are you doing in your daily life right now that were covered in those 4 pillars? The second question I'd like you to answer in these paragraphs is I'd like you to discuss anything that you'd like to incorporate in your daily life or anything that you found interesting in today's lecture to really focus on and maybe think, hey, this next week, how do I put my phone away before I go to bed? Or should I go take a little 20-minute walk in between doing work or schoolwork just to be mindful and get that rest or kind of take stress off of my life? So maybe implement one of these things that we talked about today and how you would like to incorporate that in your daily life. And the next step would be to see if it's applicable. Like, can you actually do these things and maybe try it for a week and see how you feel and report back to me? And you can tell me in our next assignment that we do. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to ask me, email me, and I can answer those. But I hope you all had a great day and enjoy this lecture.